many of you got to ride the school bus whenever you were growing up? Oh yeah, here we are right here, school bus. When I was in elementary school, I was in East Tennessee in the late 70s, early 80s, and the school buses had their own fiefdom in those days. And my bus driver was Mr. Peanut. Hillbilly guy, about 30 years old. He totally was you could tell once we got on the bus, he drove as fast as he could to get us home so he could be done with this gig. There were no bus monitors in those days at all. I'm sure, Amy, you could give us all kind of stories, girlfriend. Yes. Hasn't changed any? Okay. Hasn't changed any. So, but we were total monkeys, all right? So like, there would be days where we would just double up the buses. So literally there would be 4 of us squished in a seat with kids on top of us. And some would actually sit up. Sometimes we'd sit up on the back of the seat to make room for people to sit here if Mr. Peanut had to run double route. It wasn't go back and get the kids. It was just get on the bus. And let's see where I was going with all this, but so to ride the bus, my mother taught me she told me, she didn't really teach me how to fight, but she was like, all right, if somebody hits you, you hit them back. You need to hold your ground, and you need to look out for your little brother. So I was in 5th, 6th grade in elementary school. They had 6th grade and all that together. And my brother in 1st grade rode the bus with me. And of course I was, don't go picking a fight, but take up for yourself because you don't want the world running all over you. So even with this worldview, where I was told I could get into a fight if I needed to, don't start one. I really only got into one fight and one sort of fight. I know, shocking, right? It really wasn't huge. The sort of fight was, when you got that many kids crammed on the bus, we kind of run our own world. So there was this one neighbor kid, friend of mine, he wanted to prove how tough he was. And so he was going to pick one of us girls to give him a good sock in the jaw to show him how tough he was. And so he picked me. He's like, all right. So we're standing in the aisle of the bus, and he's demonstrating to everyone how tough he is because, I'm going to hit him in the jaw. And I'm like, I've never hit anybody in the face in my life. So I was thinking, well, there was Batman show, with POW, Socket, and all that. And then WWF, I watched that, World Wrestling Federation. So, I gave it my best guess, and I socked him in the jaw, and I really rung his bell. And he didn't ask for any more audiences on how tough he was. So that was kind of a sort of fight, but the real one was we had this little gang that sat in the very back. So the very back of the bus is a super cool place to be because in the hills of East Tennessee, if going down a hill or whatever, you hit, there's this one big bump place, everyone flies. And you just fall all over the place, on the floor, wherever, on top of each other, and it's just pure mayhem. And of course, Mr. Peanut's driving fast because he just wants to get rid of us. So in the back, this little fiefdom of bullies sat back there. And this one just always was awful, profanity, and nobody could sit back here, but his gang. And it was really kind of irritating because it's kind of nice to sit back there sometimes, or to at least trade out and let other people have fun back there. But one day it happened to be my turn to receive all of the baloney. He was blah blah blah, And my little brother was a scrapper. And he turned around to the bully and he told him to shut up and not talk to his sister like that. Well, in those days, we had what was called the bee stinger. And the bee stinger was you went to your mother's, you went to your mother's hair care stuff. And there's regular bobby pins and there were long bobby pins. So you sneak out a long bobby pin and you take one leg of it and you twist it backwards and hook it to the other one so that whenever you would touch somebody, it'd snap them. It felt like a bee sting. So that was like your personal weapon, all right? Everyone had one in their pocket. And all the mothers, I guess, had no idea what was going on. Maybe they did. But this bully got he had a bee stinger in his pocket and popped my brother. I lost my ever-loving mind. I grabbed him by the neck and I slammed him up against the side of I can feel it today. I was shaking. I slammed him up against the side of the bus in the window, and I don't know what I yelled at him. I had to do something with keep your hands off my brother, because, you can beat up your brother, but nobody else can beat up your brother. So I just lost it. And then my senses came to me, and I was just like, I've never done this in my life. And I looked at Mr. Peanut, because, you've got that mirror over where they can see the bus, like he can do anything or wanted to do anything. He was smiling. He was like real happy. And I was like, I might get in a lot of trouble. I just let the guy, chunked him down, and I just went back to my seat. The bus was quiet for the whole ride. I've never heard it so quiet. And I don't know, it was just not one of my better moments. But I guess if you wanted to say, ask if I was ever in a fight, I guess that would be about as close as I came to all that. This is how I'm starting a sermon on the golden rule. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Jesus even says it twice in this passage to just kind of dig it in. Love your neighbors. Love your enemies, love your neighbors, you love yourself. And then he takes it in this specifically says, love your enemy. Well, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Let's all sing the doxology, right? I admit that I don't have all the answers how to, as I sat with this for weeks, I was on the struggle bus, knowing that this passage was coming up, because it's often been looked at as a doormat theology, that you just let people run all over you, walk all over you like a doormat, the wimpy gospel maybe. And I just don't believe that that is what Jesus modeled for us, because Jesus' actual model of life was nothing wimpy. It was strong and wise, healing, redemptive. He loved his enemy, and did all those things that he listed there to do as well. So the more I studied, and I found some historical context to help me frame this passage better so I could understand more deeply what Jesus is getting at. It sounds easy, but as with Jesus' things that he tells us, though it sounds super easy, we get ourselves into some complicated situations where does this work? Doormat theology is not Jesus. Diana Butler Bass, I found in her research, she emphasized that it's obvious that Jesus does not live a life of revenge either, but this life of love, that loving can be harder than revenge. Revenge just feels good, doesn't it? Yeah, we can sit and we can dream of all the things we'd like to do to them because they did this to us or someone that we love. But to think of loving things to do to those who've harmed others unjustly is the tougher thing to live into. If you remember last week in the previous passage, Jesus laid out 4 blessings for 4 woes. He gave us guidelines. And we see that in Leviticus and Deuteronomy a lot. Here are all the rules. And then it gives us some practice on how to practice what the rules are. If this happens, then do this. If this happens, then do that. So then Jesus also takes from 4 blessings and 4 woes and then gives us some real practical hands-on things to get across. This is what I mean, y'all. He says, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. All right. Bless those who are cursing you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on one cheek, offer them the other. If they want your coat, give them your coat and your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. If anyone takes away or steals from you, then don't ask for it back. And this is tough words. It flies in the face of Leviticus and Deuteronomy's eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and trying to take from each other equal amounts. And it's a mind-boggling reconciliation style that is saying, we're not going to do this take away. We're going to do this give and give. And if they take, then give. And actually, one theologian who sat with us, Walter Wink, he says the first audience that listened to this, to Jesus's words, actually smiled really big and might have even chuckled a little bit as he painted the picture of how to do these things. If you love your enemy, you imagine that the enemy is going to be baffled that you return kindness when they're ready to fight. And there's no fight. There's nothing to fight. It's just been totally disarmed. It really makes them look bad. It can put them in quite the quandary. Now, if you bless and pray for them after they've cursed and abused you, once again, you have frustrated and embarrassed them because you're not meeting them with the same tools. You've changed the game and you're playing according to kingdom rules. Now, the whole thing that really made me chuckle was the striking on both cheeks, offer one cheek then the other. Walter Wink said that in the culture of the day, you don't have a lot of flowing water to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom. So he's like, the left hand was not used in public touching of any kind. It was only your right hand. So he said, if someone hits you with the hand and he needs to hit the other cheek, it's going to be a little more difficult. And very specifically, he said, if they ball up their fist to hit you, that means they see you as equals. It's like two people on the same, on the same level of looking to each other in power, I guess you could say. Not someone who wasn't a slave or a slave you would slap, because that's more of a disgraceful movement than it is a punch. So a punch is someone that you feel you're matched with power. A slap is like degrading. So if you're going to slap them on the other cheek, you have to go back like this. And the first audiences are listening to it is thinking of something kind of like the Three Stooges, kind of like this. So it becomes this little bit of humor for the audience to listen to it. And when your coat is taken to pay off a debt, and you offer the shirt too, and it is this image in their mind of like they've been conquered by the Roman Empire, who is taking and taking and taking, and so the debt, the one that they owe the debt to is coming to them, and it's like, we need this bill paid. It's like, I don't have anything to give. You've taken it all already. You want my coat, and that was often offered, to give the coat off your back. And to give them your shirt too, if they took the coat, is what Jesus is saying. And that's where you get the saying that someone would give you the shirt off their own back. It comes from this thing, well, I just give you everything. And then the person stand there naked, because they could give them the loincloth too. And it's like, wait a minute, you don't want to see nakedness. But it gets the point across to the one who's demanding the coat and the shirt and other unmentionables, that if you do that, you're going to get flashed. So you have to decide how much you want to keep taking from me, because there is a bottom to the barrel. The other concept of that is that in the culture, there was a rule that if you took somebody's clothes because of their debt, you could only take it during daytime hours. And then you'd have to return it to them so they had something warm for overnight. So you're really, the creditor is really putting themselves out by having to keep coming to you twice a day to take and give back, so that they would have something to take away from you again. So it becomes this kind of a little chuckle of they're giving back to me so that they can, like you're wearing them out instead of wearing you out. And then it goes on, give to everyone who begs, and taking what you have. It's that thing that you're going to have to give it back to me so I can give it back to you, because you've taken everything that I have. And there is a bottom to this barrel. How much do you want to take from me? And then it goes to, do to others how you want to be treated. And this is assuming that everyone wants to be treated well. Maybe there's someone, it's kind of complicated. They don't like themselves, they don't treat themselves well, so I guess if they read this passage, they would treat others badly. And what if, in all of this giving and giving, that looks like a doormat gospel, what if we're just feeding something that needs rehabilitation, something that needs healing from addiction? How do we measure that in such a way so that health can return? And these are honest questions. Jesus' life was not a doormat, and neither is ours. So I'm inspired by Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis, he was interviewed on Joe Rogan's show, like, I don't know, 5+ years ago or something. My son listened, my oldest, and he was like, Mom, you have to listen to Daryl Davis's interview with Joe Rogan. He is amazing. So the whole thing with Daryl is he's a guy in his mid-60s. He's a black man. He is an R&B gospel soul artist. He's played for B.B. King and all the greats. And he grew up as the son of a foreign U.S. diplomat. So he grew up in other countries. His first time encountering U.S. racism, he was 10 years old. He was a Cub Scout in the parade holding the flag. And trash and rocks were being thrown at him, and the parent sponsors came and formed a little wall around him so he wasn't harmed. And when he got done, he was asking his dad, what is this weird cultural thing that they do in America? And he said his dad had to explain to him what racism was, that he wasn't liked because he was black. And he said, so from there on, my whole life curiosity was, how come they hate me when they don't even know me? Did I do something? I didn't do anything to them. They don't know me. So in his lifelong quest to understand why people hate him because they don't know him, or why do they hate him if they don't know him, he began this journey of finding ways to be friends with KKK members. And he is something else. He has personally got to know and sat down with 20 KKK members. He befriended them and is credited for leading over 200 people out of the KKK. And many of them, as they left, they gave Daryl his robes. They just surrendered their robes. They didn't need it anymore. So he's got this collection of KKK robes. I think he's got on display in a little museum or something. But he wrote a book in 1998 called The Clandestine Relationships, A Black Man's Odyssey into the KKK. And but if you ever listen to that podcast, it's tension filled, but it's beautiful how it all turns out. At one point, for just a few years, the KKK dismantled in Maryland just because of Daryl. It fell apart, but it reformed again later under something new called the Confederate White Knights by Richard Preston. Now, Richard Preston is the guy who shot the gun at counter-protesters in 2017's Unite the Right rally, and he was jailed. And Daryl posted bond for Preston. He befriended him. He becomes his personal friend. He took him to the National Museum of African American History, and they sat down and became friends together, doing life together. Shortly after, in no time, Daryl was asked to walk Preston's bride down the aisle as Preston got married. Now, Daryl's history in this kind of reconciliation, so radical, is very unusual. But this transformation is inspiring, and it establishes a lasting peace that is phenomenal. So it matters for us to understand that if we keep doing the same old things that are hateful or just in that kind of way we've always been trained, that we're just going to get more of that same thing. Arguments, unfriending, surrounding ourselves with others who mirror our very own way of life. We begin to insulate ourselves and live inside of a perceived fear. But what if, like Daryl, We became curious and befriended a perceived enemy or person with differing views with hopes of peace and reconciliation. It sounds like the kingdom of God to me. Could my school bus fight had a better outcome? Of course. Of course it could have. I know I was a kid. An important ending I want to tell you about choking the bully was, of course, I wasn't curious. I didn't talk to him the rest of that day. Had a lot of feelings. He didn't talk to me either, and his ego was busted. I just let him be. But the next day, when I got on the school bus, the back seats were wide open. He wasn't there. And his friends didn't follow him into the back seats. They didn't just claim him. They dispersed into the rest of the bus. So we went to the back seat. We got to enjoy the big ride of our life. But when the bus went by his house that day, there was a U-Haul van in the driveway. That was the next day. And he was helping what I think were his parents load boxes on that moving van. And that house was very familiar to all of us, that people often moved in and out of that house a lot, maybe a rental or something. And looking back, the way that he treated me may have been the only way that he'd ever been treated or ever knew how to respond to others, was always in anger. I have no idea. But man, isn't life so complicated? It can be gut-wrenching. So this passage, in its straightforwardness, is complicated as well. And especially as I sit with, in reference to judging others toward the end of that section, it says, the measure you use will be measured back to you. And this measure of power returned beautifully to Daryl. And on the other hand, I know folks who don't have inspiring outcomes when they live according to kingdom rules. My black and brown friends have suffered when they've protested. My LGBTQIA contacts and friends have experienced pain as they have loved into spaces seeking to be understood and to create friendships. Homeless friends have been pushed to the margins, and it's so hard for them to even find a place to sleep and a place to belong even in this current culture. And I'm aware some of us are barely in our own homes that we're in now. There's traumatized souls of various traumas. This does not seem to work out for them. They were kind to those who perceive them as enemies, and they perceive them as enemies. But in exchange for kindness and their pleading and seeking to understand and love, maybe some shared stories where they were lured in with hateful intent and harmed. And I asked Jesus to show me, when will the kindness return for my friends in that same measure? When does the measure to measure get repaid for my friends? And it's all, sorry to bust the gospel up in these struggles, but they're real struggles that I have folks reaching out to me with questions about. Real life questions and burdens. They live by the golden rule, but what was given back to them was not great at all. Jesus knows. Jesus knows sometimes that we can love and hate is transformed and lives are changed, and so is the world. And Jesus knows that our enemies will kill you too for it. Crucify, lynch. But nothing stops love. Not even death. We are a resurrection people as Christians, a people of unstoppable love. Should the injustice of this world stop us from loving our enemy, from being generous? Should it stop that? Reinhold Niebuhr says, absolutely not. Do not stop. By no means. Keep at it in this imperfect world. In your striving, for the breaking in of the kingdom of God will come through you. You are not a doormat. You are representing Jesus Christ, the one who reached into the world beyond boundaries and transformed. This afternoon, I plan on going to Black History Month at Wesley Smith Chapel, and I'm always inspired every year when I go. Their example of love in the face of so much, down through hundreds of years, peaceful protests. I'm amazed when I see how it's done with singing hymns, praying, walking together, and then they're met with the violence. Tear gas, dog attacks, clubs, handcuffs, guns, death, and jail. Yes, I'm aware that there are those who come to instigate destruction. But the people that I understand that are there, that get mislabeled, are there with peace intentions. That there is a deep reliance upon God to protect them from becoming bitter like the enemy. Oh, that's the piece that gets me too. In our loving, to push back against becoming, I will not be bitter like the enemy, but strive to love. A love that reframes the absurdity of the oppression that's coming at us and leads us all to deep reflection in our soul, a connection with God, to love in ways that transform and heal and set us free. No doormats here. A holy love with 4 woes and 4 blesseds, and love your enemy. In our application today, I would like you to go back and look through this section at the specific actions on how to love our enemy. Can you do 2 of these this week? And as you do 2 of those, how do you feel inside when you're moving into that space? Resist the feeling that you're a doormat. Connect with the other in a way to create friendship, that you're not just freely giving something away, that you're wanting more. You're wanting relationship. You're wanting to see transformation for them. You want to connect them with resources. Does it feel weird? Did you take the opportunity to make it more than just a simple exchange? Make it a transaction of love. All of this matters in our world right now because we're all looking for something true and real and authentic. And we're all watching the news and the government, and there's chaos. And it's anybody's guess into what is authentically going on. This is where you can begin with Jesus, right here in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, and you can also hear Sermon on the Plain in Luke 6. That is where I can put my belief and trust as I move into my world in Jesus, the one who showed us how to love through being broken, through bleeding, being buried, crucified, and ascended into heaven. That is no doormat. Choosing love matters. As we move into pastoral prayer,